We're witnessing something extraordinary unfold between Washington and Ottawa right now. What just happened could fundamentally alter the balance of power in North America for decades to come. President Donald Trump made a direct appeal to Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, a request involving one of the most strategically vital resources on the planet, uranium. The materials that fuel nuclear reactors, power critical infrastructure, and underpin national security. Trump needed guaranteed access, and he needed it fast. Carney's answer? A single word that has left NATO officials scrambling and sent tremors through diplomatic channels across the Western Alliance. Over the next 15 to 20 minutes, we're going to unpack exactly what was requested, why Canada holds unprecedented leverage in global nuclear markets, and how this moment might redefine the relationship between two of the world's closest allies. This isn't just about trade disputes or political posturing. This is about energy, sovereignty, and the future of technological dominance in an era where power, literal electrical power, determines who leads and who follows. Let's dive in. The request that shocked Brussels. Behind the scenes in Washington, a quiet crisis has been building for weeks. The Trump administration has launched what officials are describing internally as the most aggressive nuclear energy expansion plan in modern American history. The goal is ambitious: construct 200 small modular reactors across the country. These aren't your grandfather's massive cooling tower facilities. They're compact, next-generation systems designed to power the infrastructure of tomorrow. Artificial intelligence data centers consuming electricity at unprecedented rates, advanced manufacturing plants, military bases, and more. The estimated investment? North of $400 billion. But here's where the plan hits a wall. The United States no longer produces meaningful quantities of uranium on its own soil. Data from the U.S. Energy Information Administration reveals a stark reality. America imports roughly 95% of the uranium it consumes. The domestic mining industry has largely withered over the past few decades, a victim of cheaper foreign supplies and regulatory challenges. And when you look at where that uranium comes from, one name stands out: Canada. Canada doesn't just mine uranium. It controls some of the richest, most concentrated deposits anywhere on Earth, located deep beneath Saskatchewan's Athabasca Basin. These aren't marginal operations. We're talking about ore so rich in uranium content that it makes most other global sources look almost irrelevant by comparison. According to industry data, Canadian uranium ore from the Athabasca region averages around 20% uranium content. For context, the global average sits somewhere between 0.1 and 3%. That means Canadian uranium is between 70 and 200 times more concentrated than what you'd find almost anywhere else. It's cheaper to mine, simpler to process, and produces far less waste. For any nation serious about nuclear energy, Canadian uranium is the premium product. So Trump picked up the phone. Multiple sources familiar with the conversation, speaking to journalists under condition of anonymity, described a tense exchange. The American president reportedly made his case plainly. He wanted guaranteed access to Canadian uranium at competitive prices, expedited approvals for processing nuclear fuel, and assurances that Canada wouldn't prioritize sales to rival nations, particularly China. Trump framed it as a matter of mutual benefit: stronger North American energy independence, economic growth for both countries, security partnership between allies who've shared the longest undefended border in the world for generations. Carney listened, and after what one official described as an uncomfortably long pause, he delivered his answer. No. Not let's explore this further. Not we'll take it under advisement. Just a flat, unambiguous refusal. The fallout was immediate. Why this rejection matters. Within hours, officials at NATO headquarters in Brussels were briefing alliance partners on what had just transpired. The question being asked in hushed conversations wasn't just about uranium supplies. It was deeper. If the United States and Canada, two nations so economically and militarily intertwined that their cooperation has been taken as a given for nearly a century, can't agree on something this fundamental, what does that say about the stability of the broader Western alliance? European diplomats were stunned. Canada simultaneously opened formal discussions with France, the United Kingdom, Japan, and South Korea about long-term uranium supply agreements. According to financial reporting from Bloomberg, these potential deals could be valued at approximately $18 billion over the next 10 years. Every pound of uranium committed to those buyers is one less pound available to American reactors. Trump's team, by all accounts, didn't see it coming. They had operated under the assumption that Canada, historically cooperative, economically integrated, culturally similar, would ultimately fall in line. After all, aren't allies supposed to help each other? But Carney just weaponized Canada's natural resources, and he did it with a single syllable: understanding Canada's nuclear dominance. To grasp why this moment carries such weight, you need to understand Canada's unique position in the global nuclear ecosystem. Canada isn't just a country that happens to have uranium in the ground, it's a nuclear technology powerhouse. Canadian engineers developed the CANDU reactor design, a heavy water system considered among the most advanced in the world. The country has expertise not just in mining, but in the entire fuel cycle: refining, conversion, fabrication, and reactor operation. Saskatchewan's Cameco Corporation is the largest publicly traded uranium company on the planet, extracting roughly 30 million pounds of the element annually from those incredibly rich Athabasca Basin deposits. When nuclear utilities around the world need fuel, Cameco is often the first call they make. Now let's talk numbers, because this is where Canada's leverage becomes crystal clear. The United States currently sources uranium from several countries. Kazakhstan provides about a quarter of American imports, but Kazakhstan operates firmly within Russia's geopolitical orbit, making it a politically complicated partner, especially post-Ukraine. Russia itself has historically supplied 14%, but that's become radioactive, pun intended, in current political climate. Australia contributes around 11%, though its production faces constraints. And then there's Canada at 13%, alongside smaller contributions from Namibia and Niger. Here's the problem Trump faces. Of those suppliers, Canada is the only one that's simultaneously large-scale, politically stable, technologically advanced, and genuinely aligned with Western security interests. It's not just a supplier, it's the supplier that matters most. So, why does Trump need this uranium so desperately right now? The answer, honestly, lies in perhaps the most transformative technology of our time: artificial intelligence. The AI revolution has created an energy crisis that, well, most people don't yet understand. Companies like OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, and Amazon are racing to construct massive data centers, vast buildings filled with specialized processors that train and run AI models. These facilities consume electricity at rates that would have seemed, incomprehensible just a few years ago. A single large AI training facility can draw 100 megawatts of power continuously, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's enough electricity to power roughly 200,000 homes. And we're not talking about one facility. Every major tech company wants dozens of them. Wind and solar just can't solve this problem alone. These data centers need baseload power, reliable, constant electricity that doesn't fluctuate when the wind stops blowing or the sun sets. The only carbon-free technology that can deliver that at scale is nuclear. Trump sees this clearly. If America can deploy hundreds of small modular reactors quickly, it can capture what might be a $2 trillion economic opportunity. It can maintain technological dominance over China in the AI race. It can power the next generation of American industry without relying on fossil fuels. But none of that happens without uranium. And Canada just said no. To understand Carney's decision, you have to look at the months leading up to this phone call. Trump has not treated Canada gently. He's threatened 25% tariffs on Canadian goods. He suggested, repeatedly and apparently seriously, that Canada should become the 51st American state. He's dismissed Canadian energy exports as unnecessary. He's approached America's second-largest trading partner with what many Canadian officials view as outright contempt. According to a senior Canadian government official speaking to the Globe and Mail, the sentiment in Ottawa has been clear. Trump only calls when he wants something, never to build genuine partnership. Carney's no wasn't impulsive. It was strategic and, frankly, brilliant on multiple levels. First, it reasserts Canadian sovereignty after months of what Canadians perceived as bullying. Domestically, the impact was immediate. Polling from Angus Reid showed Carney's approval ratings jumped 11 points within 72 hours. Canadians rallied behind a leader willing to stand firm against American pressure. Second, it creates massive leverage for upcoming trade negotiations. Trump wants Canadian uranium to power his economic vision. Suddenly, all those tariff threats and trade demands look significantly less threatening. Carney can now say, "You want our uranium? Fine. Remove the steel tariffs. Drop the dairy demands. Treat us like partners, not subordinates." Third, and perhaps most sophisticated, Carney is positioning Canada as an independent middle power on the global stage. By negotiating simultaneously with France, the UK, Japan, and South Korea, he's demonstrating that Canada has options. These nations are desperate for stable uranium supplies outside Russian influence, and they're willing to pay premium prices for Canadian reliability. As one analyst from Johns Hopkins recently noted, uranium and nuclear technology are strategic assets in the same category that oil occupied throughout the 20th century. Carney understands this is generational positioning. The uranium market right now is, honestly, extraordinarily tight. Spot prices have surged from $48 per pound to $89, an 85% increase driven by reactor restarts worldwide, new construction projects, and constrained supply. Cameco has publicly stated in its quarterly earnings reports that it's sold out of production for years ahead. There isn't spare capacity floating around that the United States can simply redirect toward its needs. Trump's team apparently assumed Canada would comply because that's what allies do. They fundamentally misread how much damage had been done to the relationship. Who pays the price? The consequences of this standoff ripple outward in ways most people haven't yet considered. Silicon Valley is watching nervously. Microsoft has committed $80 billion to AI infrastructure build-out. Google is spending $75 billion. Amazon Web Services, another $100 billion. All these plans assume access to massive quantities of reliable electricity. Nuclear power is the only carbon-free option that can deliver at the required scale. According to sources at major tech companies speaking to industry publications, executives are now questioning whether their growth projections remain achievable. Without guaranteed uranium supplies, nuclear projects face delays. Without nuclear power, AI expansion stalls. Without AI leadership, American technological supremacy over China begins to erode. One senior executive at a Fortune 50 tech company told the Wall Street Journal recently, "We're looking at potentially billions in delayed investments if we can't secure power commitments. This uranium situation is a 5-alarm fire for our industry. For everyday Americans, the impact hits differently. If nuclear expansion stalls, the United States will rely more heavily on natural gas for baseload power generation. That drives up natural gas prices, which means higher heating bills for consumers and increased operating costs for energy-intensive businesses." Natural gas futures jumped nearly 5% this week as traders began pricing in exactly this scenario. Consider a small manufacturing operation in Pennsylvania running industrial equipment. If electricity costs rise 15 to 20% because planned nuclear projects are delayed and natural gas becomes the default fallback, profit margins can evaporate overnight. We're talking about potential layoffs and business closures. The U.S. Navy operates 86 nuclear-powered vessels, aircraft carriers, and submarines that form the backbone of American naval power projection globally. While military uranium supplies are theoretically separate from civilian markets, the same processing facilities and supply chains support both sectors. Defense contractors with billions in contracts to build and maintain nuclear infrastructure saw their stock prices drop between 3 and 8% this week as investors realized Canadian uranium access isn't guaranteed. The NATO Dimension. This is where the situation becomes genuinely serious from a security perspective. NATO's entire strategic framework assumes seamless US-Canada alignment on defense and security issues. The two nations cooperate through NORAD on aerospace defense, coordinate Arctic security, share submarine detection capabilities, and participate in countless classified programs together. European NATO allies are watching this uranium dispute with genuine alarm. A senior European diplomat told Politico Europe, "If America and Canada can't agree on uranium sales, how can we trust coordination on Article 5 commitments?" This represents unprecedented dysfunction between the alliance's closest partners. France, characteristically, is capitalizing on the opportunity. President Macron's office announced that France and Canada will sign a strategic partnership on civil nuclear cooperation when Carney visits Paris next month. France secures reliable uranium for its 56 reactors. Canada gains a premium buyer and deepens European ties. America gets sidelined. Michael Schellenberger, a prominent nuclear energy advocate, warned recently, "If the U.S. can't secure uranium partnerships with Canada, our closest ally, it reveals catastrophic failures in American diplomacy. China will be thrilled to step in as Canada's alternative buyer." The Eurasia Group's latest risk assessment stated bluntly, U.S.-Canada relations represent the most underestimated geopolitical risk currently facing markets. Investors are not pricing in the genuine possibility of a rupture between these allied economies. Uranium spot prices spiked 7% in a single day this week, the largest daily move in 18 months, as traders realized supplies could tighten further if Canada prioritizes non-American buyers. Dr. Pippa Malmgren, former White House advisor and respected geopolitical economist, offered this assessment. Carney's refusal is the most significant geopolitical move by a Canadian Prime Minister in generations. Canada is asserting itself as an independent power, not an American satellite. This fundamentally changes North American dynamics. Jonathan Wilkinson, Canada's former Natural Resources Minister, told the CBC, "The Carney government is simply applying the same transactional approach to Washington that Trump has applied to everyone else. If Trump treats alliances as business deals, Canada will negotiate like a business, maximizing value for Canadian interests." American reactions have been mixed. Senator John Barrasso of Wyoming, chair of the Senate Energy Committee, called Canada's position disappointing and short-sighted, adding that energy security should transcend political disputes between allies. But Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, typically a moderate Republican voice, offered a different perspective. Perhaps we need to ask why our closest ally felt compelled to refuse. What have we done to damage that relationship? Those are uncomfortable questions, but we need to answer them. The United States Nuclear Regulatory Commission currently has pending applications for 47 new reactor projects. Without confirmed long-term fuel supplies, licensing becomes problematic. Utilities require 20-year fuel commitments before breaking ground on billion-dollar plants. If Canadian supplies remain uncertain, projects could face delays or cancellations. Thomas Isaacs, former Department of Energy official and nuclear policy expert, explained to Arms Control Today, "The United States allowed its domestic uranium production to collapse over decades, operating under the assumption that allied suppliers would always be available. That assumption is now being tested. We may need to restart domestic mining, which could take years and cost billions." Expect intense diplomatic pressure on Ottawa. The United States State Department will attempt to negotiate around Carney's refusal, possibly offering concessions on tariffs or other trade irritants. Canada will leverage this moment to extract maximum value in upcoming USMCA renegotiations. Uranium prices will likely continue rising as the market prices in uncertainty. Nuclear utilities will scramble to secure alternative supplies or pay premiums to lock in existing contracts. If Trump backs down, removes tariffs, makes genuine trade concessions, treats Canada as an equal partner, Canada might soften its uranium position. If Trump doubles down on aggressive tactics, Canada will deepen partnerships with Europe and Asia, potentially locking American buyers out of premium supplies for years. The wild card remains China. If Canada gets too close to non-Western buyers, United States national security concerns could force some form of intervention, but that would only damage the relationship further. One nuclear industry executive told Bloomberg, "Trump asked for partnership but has only offered ultimatums. Canada finally called his bluff. Now we'll see if he can actually negotiate, or if this escalates into something far worse." Here's what matters. Trump desperately needs Canadian uranium to fuel his nuclear renaissance and power America's AI infrastructure expansion. But months of hostile treatment destroyed the goodwill necessary to secure that partnership. Carney's single-word rejection demonstrates that Canada is willing to use its resource leverage as a geopolitical weapon, fundamentally altering the North American power dynamic. NATO allies are witnessing a historic fracture between the alliance's most integrated partners, raising profound questions about Western cohesion at a moment when unity matters more than ever. Trump treated Canada like a subordinate. Carney just proved Canada is an independent power with resources America desperately needs. Whoever blinks first in this standoff will define North American relations for a generation. The real question now: was Carney right to demand better treatment by saying no? Or is he risking too much by alienating America when global threats from China and Russia demand Western unity? One word from Canada just changed everything. What happens next could reshape the balance of power for the next 50 years.